Snipers excel at long-range engagements and are the dominant weapon of choice in today's meta. But what separates the best snipers from the rest is the ability to use them in close range and aggressively to get the opening pick for your team. So today we have my aggressive sniper guide part 2. I will link part 1 in the description, definitely check that out, and leave a like and subscribe if you find this helpful. So I've definitely talked about some of these things before on the channel at some point, but there's definitely some new tips as well that I haven't included. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember everything that I've covered completely on the channel so far, so if something's just a bit of a refresher, I'm sorry, but my channel is also pretty small, so chances are there are a lot of new people as well who haven't heard some of these tips before at all. So let's hop right into it. My first tip is pretty niche and it's going to have to do with sniping in close range. Specifically sniping people who are airborne or like pushing you vertically. Basically, I see a lot of people, and I used to do this myself, but you try to like follow someone with your scope who is falling or running towards you. And you'll try to like drag your scope trying to catch up to the person and make sure you can like line up the shot. I used to do this too, but if I'm being honest, it's just too hard to keep up with your scope. Like it's too hard to pull your scope towards someone that's moving that fast. I play at 18 sensitivity and I can't even do it. So what I recommend you do is to kind of pick a spot in front of the person that is falling and just wait for them to get there. I'll usually just hold unscoped, or I can scope too once I line it up, but basically you're just going to pick a spot where they're falling and just let them come to you. Basically, you're not going to drag your scope trying to hit it. You're just going to sort of aim in front of them and wait. Sometimes you can scope in and see if you can line it up. Like I have an example here. I kind of scope in and then I realize like I'm not going to be able to catch up to him, so I just unscope and then wait for him to fall right into it. So yeah, this is pretty niche. Like I said, it's not something that's going to happen every round obviously, but hey, it might win you a game or two in the future, so definitely keep this in mind. Next up also has to do more so with sniping in close range, and that is to build up the muscle memory to follow up your body shots. In a ton of my clips, if you pay attention, you will see me immediately swapping to my primary weapon after sniping, especially in closer range, even if I do hit the headshot. That is because you need to build up the muscle memory to finish kills with your primary. If you do hit a body, which will happen, you need to immediately just get it in your brain to swap weapons. This works best with like a hand cannon, but no matter what you're using, there's nothing wrong with hitting a body shot and then swapping to the primary to get the kill. One, it saves ammo. Like you don't really want to be double bodying people if you don't have to. I mean, if they're across the map, sure, go for it. But in close range, sometimes you want to save that extra bullet. This also applies to melees as well. At least when you're in extremely close range, right? In melee range. If somebody's extremely close, just go for a body shot or no scope if you need, and you can immediately just hit the melee button like you would with a shotgun. Build this muscle memory is extremely important. Okay, next up, this is more of a general sniping tip. I do think I've talked about this before, but basically you do not want to be blind peeking lanes. Basically, you want to avoid peeking lanes that you have no intel on. Now, what do I mean by intel? Well, examples of intel would be like a radar ping or a call out from a teammate, or maybe you put a rift down or a barricade and you can kind of look around the corner in the third person, things like that. Basically, you want to have a decent idea of where the person is or where the enemy team is before you just peek a lane blindly. I'm not saying that you can never face check something or look without having any intel, but make it a habit to avoid peeking things that you are completely blind to. One thing I like to do is to look for bullets from the other team and sort of trace those bullets back to the source. Like if you're going to slide the corner, it can make slide sniping someone very easy if you can sort of follow the bullets from their weapons right back to them. Okay, next up, know which angles are good or bad. So not all lanes or angles are created equally. Some are very hard to take as a sniper. I know I've talked about this before, but look at this angle here on Dead Cliffs, for example. In my opinion, this is a bad lane to take. Look at how many places I would have to check if I'm looking for like an enemy sniper. I would have to first look here to the very right, then also in like the cracked wall over here. The next is like right past the wall in front of the pipes. You have to look there. You have to look behind the pipes on this little spot is pretty popular. Then you have to kind of look to the left of this, like right on the little box, like in front of it, people go there. You also have to look on top of the box, and you have to look in the dark tunnel. Like you even have to look in the front here sometimes. Like there's just like so many places you have to look. versus like on the other side, like if you're on the other side of this angle, you just have to look at the close divider and the far divider. Like there's only two options, and it's not even that big of an adjustment for your scope. Like if you're looking at the wrong one, it's really not that big of a deal. You can just move. Again, I'm not saying never peek this angle or that you can't. I'm just saying to keep this type of thing in mind when you are sniping down certain lanes, because like there are several different examples of this on almost every map. So just keep an eye out for it, and sort of like if you find yourself peeking something and you're like, there's just too many spots to look, just know that like maybe that's not the best angle to take. But then also know that when you're on the other side, that know that the other person will be in that situation, if that makes sense. So anyway, basically know which lanes are good and bad. Don't take one that like has too many angles for you to look at. The next tip I have is pretty basic, but I see a lot of people struggling with this all the time, and that is to pay attention to your radar. Get out of your scope. When you are scoped in, you obviously lose your radar, but you need to be fully aware of where the enemy team is at all times, especially as a sniper. Think about it. If someone is on your radar, that means they are relatively close to you, which you might not want as a sniper. So here's what I do. There's nothing wrong with holding an angle and basically just hard scoping. I mean, will people complain? Yeah, that's all that people do in this game is complain. So it doesn't matter what you do, people are going to complain. But there's nothing wrong with just hard scoping an angle. But what you need to do is constantly unscope every few seconds and just look at your radar. I'll be scoped in trials or something, waiting for someone to peek, and then if you watch my like streams or videos or whatever, you'll notice I'll just unscope like almost obsessively every few seconds. That's just to look at the radar and make sure I'm not getting flanked. I'm personally pretty good at watching the radar. I feel like, as usually on the teams that I play with, I'm usually the first person or sometimes the only person to notice flanks or to give callouts on like people's locations. Even though in theory as a sniper it should kind of not be that way, it should be kind of harder, but I just pay really good attention, so it's definitely a good skill you can have. The other thing is it will kind of tell you when you need to get ready to like snipe someone. Like if you're close enough to where, let's say you're holding an angle and you're waiting for someone to come around the corner, if you're close enough to it to where they'll be on the radar, you can kind of know that they're not there yet until you see a radar ping like approaching, and then you could be like, okay, I need to get ready, he's probably gonna peek. That's another big plus. For sure, add that to your game. Definitely be watching the radar. You can still hold an angle and watch your radar at the same time. My next tip, and this definitely adds to the aggressive playstyle, is to reposition constantly. I'm not even just talking about round to round, which you should do. You should always be mixing up where you're going, but I mean during the same round. You should peek from one side of the lane and then go to the other side of it, find a different lane and go back. Like you should be constantly mixing up where you're coming from. You want to make the other team constantly have to sweat and worry about where you are and trying to find your location. Honestly, this is one of the main ways to really make your sniper feel like oppressive to the other team. If you're constantly hitting shots and constantly moving around, this will basically like strike fear into the enemy team, as they will just be like, man, this guy is everywhere, like nothing is safe, there's nothing we can do. Like that's how you can really start to make like your presence like felt by the other team, is if you're constantly mixing up your location. I mean, like, yeah, maybe you can just go to the same spot every time. Like obviously if you're a much better player than the other team, or your team is much better than the other team, doesn't really matter. But when you're playing against a good team, something like this, like it's pretty easy to do, just mixing up where you're going. Something like this can definitely be the difference maker. This is why something like Dawn Blade is so good on with a sniper, because you can Icarus dash around the map and you can move very quickly to get from lane to lane and to mix up your angles. Okay, speaking of angles, my next tip has to do with holding angles. That's going to be to avoid standing in the obvious spots, I guess is what I'm going to call this. So the best way for me to explain what I mean is with an example. Here on Dead Cliffs, you could stand in this door right here. Yeah, like this is a common spot. A lot of people just stand here in this door. There's nothing wrong with standing in this spot. It's not a bad spot. I'll stand here sometimes. I like this spot. It's a good spot, but this is a very popular spot and it is pretty easy to expect. So why stand here when you can just like stand up here on this box? Just something like as simple as this. Just step over to the side and jump up on this box. It just adds like another layer of variability. Like they're gonna know you're here because they're gonna see you on the radar if they're peeking from here, but they're probably not gonna expect you to be on this box. They're not gonna expect your head to be like way higher than it should be, if you know what I mean. Just little things like this it just makes a big difference. Like, it can really be the difference between getting the opening snipe or getting sniped. Just little things like this make a huge difference. I'm not saying that you need to stand on this box every time, but maybe if you've stood in the door for a round or two, or maybe you want to open by standing on the box, this works against good players. I do this in scrims as well. Just something to mix it up. Look for little things like this. Maybe sometimes I'll stand in the middle of the lane because people expect you to be like on the edge of the lane. Like, just things like that. Just do weird things, stand in weird spots. Just mix it up. Even when you're peeking the same angles, there's still different ways that you can do it. Keep an eye out for little things like this. Okay, my final tip for the day is one that I did not want to talk about, but I've been asked like a million times in the comments. That's how to deal with flinch when you're sniping. Honestly, after the most recent flinch update, sometimes you just can't. I mean, well, really, you mostly just can't at all. You get flinch so bad sometimes, especially if you're running like a cloud strike or something. Like, you just have no chance. Your scope just goes to the sky. So, but if you build into it, you can sometimes handle it. Like, if you have a very high stability sniper with high resil, maybe some of the like flinch reducing perks, like it can become more manageable. It can be possible. But I don't build into it. I don't really think it's worth it, but it's definitely something you can do. But what I did want to talk about is there is a way to sort of like a trick to sort of shoot through some flinch, but only if the other person is using a hand cannon. What I do is, once I realize there's a hand cannon, I will line up my shot, but I will not pull the trigger. I will let myself get hit twice and then pull the trigger before the third shot. So between the second and third shot, because it takes 3 shots to kill you. So basically, I will sort of take the time during the first 2 shots to line up like the sniper shot, and then before the third shot goes off from the hand cannon, you can pull your trigger. Now, sometimes you'll die. It's still a risk. Like, you still get flinched. It is hard to do. But you can definitely do this. I do this pretty consistent. It's pretty annoying to deal with. I know it's not fun. I'm not saying like this is a good thing that's in the game, but hey, it's in the game. So definitely try to like keep that in mind and practice it. I will say the meta right now is like SMGs. Yeah, there's just no sniping through that. Like, your scope goes to the moon and you die in like 0.5 seconds. So good luck with that. But hand cannons, or maybe like a slow firing scout, maybe a pulse if someone misses it. Just due to the nature of those weapons, the slower firing ones, you can like try to line up the snipe and get it in between bursts or between shots. So definitely keep that in mind. Like I said, I understand it's very frustrating when when you're on the receiving end of this, but I just wanted to point it out since I get asked like so many times about it. Okay, and that's gonna do it for my second guide here. There's a few more tips I do have ready as well, but I wanted to go more in depth on them and sort of make separate videos. So definitely stay tuned and subscribe if that's something you're interested in. But as always, I'm Awake, and I'll see you guys next time.